Please welcome the editorial director at the Heartland Institute, Justin Haskins.
Good afternoon, Denver. How's everybody doing? Good? All right. Before I get started, I just want to note that if you're interested in the topic of this presentation, socialism, and who isn't interested in socialism these days, right? Please join the Heartland Institute. They're hosting a presentation on socialism. We're going to go into lots of detail on some of the stuff I'm just going to touch upon here. It's in room 505 at 3:30 p.m., room 505. All right, so here's something that most Americans never thought just a few decades ago that they would be talking about today. Socialism is on the rise in America. A 2019 Harry Stevens Axios poll found 61% of Americans, 61%, 18 to 24 years old, say they favor socialism. Gallup found in 2018 that about half of all Americans 18 to 29 say they favor socialism. That was more than the number of Americans who said that they favored capitalism. These figures shouldn't just worry you or concern you or make you feel a little anxious about our future. They should terrify you. More than 167 million people have been murdered, exiled, or imprisoned by socialist and communist parties in just the past 100 years. Now let's just stop for a minute and think about that. It's easy to throw out this number, 167 million people. What does that even really mean? About 72,000 Americans died in 2017 from drug overdoses. That includes from opioids. We hear about the opioid crisis all the time on the news. Almost every single day we hear about it. At that rate, which is historically high, it would take 2,000 years to match the death toll, the destruction, the chaos caused by socialism and communism. Many of us remember September 11th. The tragedy of September 11th, it would take 56,000 terrorist attacks the size of September 11th to inflict the damage caused by socialism and communism in the past 100 years. 56,000 September 11ths. Now, if a socialist were here right now, and I seriously doubt there are any socialists here right now in this room lurking about, but you never know, I guess, the socialists would probably say, look, this is all just wild fear-mongering. That we're not that kind of socialists. We're not authoritarians. We're not jackboot-wearing stormtroopers or anything like that. That's not who we are. We're democratic socialists. We support democracy, and democracy is always good, right? Democracy is never bad. Actually, no, that's not true. History tells us that democracy is not always good. Just ask African Americans living in the 1800s in the South whether they thought democracy worked for them. In 1814, John Adams, who understood why democracy is not the best approach, wrote, "Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. It is in vain to say that democracy is less vain, less proud, less selfish, less ambitious, or less avaricious than aristocracy or monarchy. Those passions are the same in all men under all simple forms of government, and when unchecked, produce the same effects of fraud, violence, and cruelty." So the Founding Fathers understood that this kind of national democracy demanded by socialists today is extremely dangerous, which is precisely why they enshrined in state constitutions and in the federal constitution inalienable rights, protections for us as individuals. And I think that's something that we often miss. So often, people like myself, when we talk about socialism, we talk about the dangers of socialism, we like to talk about economics, right? We talk about GDP growth, unemployment rates. We talk about debt and inflation. We talk about people starving in Venezuela so that they kill zoo animals. That's the sort of thing we like to talk about. But what doesn't get nearly enough attention is that even if socialism worked the way Comrade Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that it would, even if it worked and created these perfect little utopian societies, it would still be extremely immoral. Because in socialism, even well-functioning socialism, which by the way doesn't exist anywhere in the world, one of the most, you never have real religious freedom or freedom of conscience. Never. It's never happened. Minorities are always subjected to the will of the ruling class. So, for example, in a democratic socialist society, one that has, say, single-payer health care, which every Democratic Party presidential candidate right now is calling for, if they were to decide that they want abortion or contraception or free birth control pills or physician-assisted suicide or any number of other things, everyone has to pay for it. Everyone, even those people who believe it's against their religious and moral beliefs. Socialists often say they care about individual rights. They say that they love freedom of speech. They love freedom of religion. They would do anything to protect it. They tell us this all the time. Let me be really clear. They're lying to you. They don't care about these things. They say that they do, but they don't. And to illustrate my point, let's read a quote from the Constitution. It says, "Citizens are guaranteed freedom of conscience. That is, the right to profess or to not profess any religion and to conduct religious worship. Incitement of hostility or hatred on religious grounds is prohibited." Now, if that language sounds a little foreign to you, that's because it's not from our Constitution. It's from the Soviet Union's Constitution. Oh, wait a minute. I thought that the Soviet Union hated religious liberty. We know that the Soviets were some of the most heinous violators of human rights that the world has ever known. How could they have had a constitution that protects individual rights? How is that possible? Well, as any good lawyer will tell you, the devil's in the details. The Soviet Union did protect citizens for all sorts of personal liberties. At least they promised that they would. The Constitution enshrined those rights. But in another section of the Soviet Constitution, it reads this: "Enjoyment by citizens of their rights and freedoms must not be to the detriments of the interests of society or the state." See, the Soviets, like the democratic socialists of today, they promised individual rights, but only if it didn't get in the way of what was considered to be for the good of the state. And who decides that? The state. It's a pretty good setup. In socialism, whether it's the socialism of Bernie Sanders or the socialism of the Soviet Union, you only matter in the sense that you belong to the collective. You see, you as an individual, you don't matter. You exist to serve the community, not your church, not your family, and sure as heck not yourself. You as an individual, you don't matter, and your religion doesn't matter, because in socialism, collectivism is your religion, and government is your God. I can't think of anything more blasphemous than that, and yet that is a core, foundational principle of every socialist system that has ever existed. So as I hope you realize by now, socialism isn't just bad, it isn't just ineffective, it isn't just broken, harmful, economically destructive, foolish. Socialism is evil. It's immoral. It's wrong. Now, I'd love to think that people like me can run around the country giving speeches about socialism, and everyone's just going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't go down this road. I don't know if we should be like Venezuela and the Soviet Union, but if experience has taught me anything, it's this. That's not how things work. If we're going to win this war against socialism, it's going to be won by people like you. It's going to be won at dinner tables, in car rides, and on family vacations. It's going to be one with passionate conversations around water coolers at work. It's going to be one with late-night conversations, discussions between parents and their children. That's where this is going to be won. To beat socialism, we all need to join together in this fight. Each one of us needs to become an evangelist, tirelessly preaching the gospel of liberty. That is our only hope. If we do that, we have a chance to save our country. If we fail, then we will lose everything that generations of Americans before us have worked so hard to protect and defend. Well, one day after the Constitution was signed in the 18th century by members of Congress, a Mrs. Powell of Philadelphia asked Benjamin Franklin, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" To which he famously replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." And since that time, one generation after the next has chosen to keep our republic and to preserve individual liberty. And now it's our generation's turn to decide. It's up to us. Will we keep our republic by standing together in favor of religious liberty and other personal freedoms, or will we allow our nation to perish at the hands of socialists? This will be this generation's defining question. Let's make sure America provides the right answer. Thank you. God bless our republic.